Oh, I am muted. All of that was wasted on myself. Sorry about that, everybody. Somehow they changed the feature on this on StreamYard. They keep changing things on StreamYard. Anyway, not your problem to worry about. It's just mine. I am your host, Joshua R. Pangborn, and this is SideKick Power Hour, which is from all of the thank you. I am. This is the most sense I've ever made muted. I appreciate that, David. I am definitely very, very coherent when it comes to not hearing me talk, I guess. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us tonight. This is Psychic Power Hour, and we were off last week because we were out filming The Contract. If you have not heard of The Contract, that is our next feature film. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a taste of it if you haven't seen the trailer yet. We're going to quickly watch this 1 minute little clip right here for you all.
There once was a young sub named Oliver who would do anything to belong. He found a house in the middle of the woods and people there who wanted him to join, and all he had to do was learn,
Are you something what's going on in there? Or am I gonna carve you like a pumpkin?
love,
I didn't disfigure myself so you could make me do chores.
and listen.
Tell that asshole if he wants his toilets cleaned, do it himself.
Or leave. I thought you said you like following orders.
You're gonna make a Bethos impression.
We are very close to finishing this movie. We had to do 2 days of pickup shots, not because we really had to add anything, but because when you are a filmmaker and you want to make the best thing possible, and you have the time to do it, you go and you do extra angles and things where you should have gotten them before, but you had to rush something. Now we're gonna take the time and we're doing it, and so we did. And I cannot wait for you to see this movie. I am so excited. We are currently also running our Indiegogo campaign for this, and we have 10 days left. So if you can help us, tell people about it, go to the donation and donate something yourself. Just go to thecontractfilm.com and you'll be able to see what we're doing, say what we're offering as perks, and also get a little bit more information about the movie and why we're making it and all that we do. Everything we do at Sidekick Productions is focused on telling queer, fat positive, and sex positive stories. And this movie, I think, encapsulates that more than anything I think we've ever done. So I am really, really excited for you all to see it. And again, we have 10 days left. So if you want to go to thecontractfilm.com right now, you'll be able to help out and see how we can get this movie across the finish line. Or, as they say in the contract business, sign on the dotted line and all that. So, and all the puns we could possibly bring in for signing on the contract. But enough of that. We also did some really fun filming this weekend on Skeleton Crew season 6, and if you are following along on the Patreon, you'll know that we've been hard at work on pre-production and now production of Skeleton Crew season 6. So I can't wait for you all to see that. But why are we here tonight? We are here because it is a time to celebrate another amazing person in the world who does amazing and very important work, I think, because I am always a huge celebrant of people who do horror and queer horror, especially. And this person came up 2 weeks ago. Coincidentally, Sean Abley was our guest 2 weeks ago. He didn't know I was planning to bring on our guest tonight. But he brought him up and talked about how amazing he is and all the work that he does with Comic Con and the cons that he does for Queer for Fear. We talked about reclaiming some of the horror films that we should reclaim for the queer zeitgeist. We're going to talk about the queer horror that our guest makes, and we're going to talk about other things with horror probably, because this person, I think, lives horror even more than I do. So without further ado, I will bring on our guest tonight, and please, everyone, welcome Michael with me.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. I am so glad to see you and finally meet you in person.
Yes, I'm so excited to meet you and to digitally meet in person. In fact, I'll give a little behind the scenes tea here and I'll tell on myself. We had planned to connect a little bit right before this, about 10 minutes before the recording time, but my computer decided to go nuts. Then I knocked over some water. So outside of a 30-second or so conversation, Joshua and I are really getting to connect for the first time here on the air, which feels right? Like as filmmakers.
I think it's appropriate. I
Yes.
mean, this is how it works, I think, for a lot of people. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm really glad to be here, and I really appreciate the invite. And thank you for the kind words. That was very nice.
Oh no, of course. I mean, I've watched you from I've known about you for a while now, and I've watched your career and what you do and everything. And you and I happened to be in the same festival this year. We were in the Sohom Pride Horror Fest in well virtually, I guess, because it was a virtual festival. But your movie, I always get the title wrong. I want to call it The Zombie Outside, but it's I Saw a Zombie Outside.
There's a zombie outside.
There's a zombie outside. See,
Yeah.
I can never get that right. I'm useless when it comes to titles sometimes.
Worries.
But yeah, and that's where I got to see your movie, which I've heard about on the circuit for a while now, and it was really great to be a part of the same festival and see that. And I really loved it so much. It was really so. Why don't you tell us about it? Because I think I think that's your most recent movie, isn't it?
Yeah. So There's a Zombie Outside is a queer horror feature, and it is centered around an artist whose identity is wrapped up in the world of cult films. It's where he feels most closely identified. But as the movie begins to unfurl, he has some issues telling fact from fiction when a monster from one of the movies that he was part of starts presenting itself perhaps in real life. So it is a zombie movie, but it's also not a zombie movie. It's a little bit of a misdirect. And the movie, we shot it a couple years ago already, which is wild to me. But anybody who is part of indie filmmaking knows that sometimes when you shoot a movie and when a movie is released are often not always in the closest proximity. But the movie was born out of my own kind of complicated feelings with the state of queer horror while I was writing the film. It was really about this place. I've been working as someone who's explored the intersection of queer identity and horror for most of my career. To your point about Sean Abley, Sean knows and has been part of and basically handed me the keys to the queer horror panel at San Diego Comic-Con close to 15 years ago. He had been hosting it and then had to step away. And I took over the panel. And in that time, have been hosting the panel at this big venue. And it's been growing and growing and growing. But I've got to watch also as there's been what seems to be a public or more mainstreaming of queer horror, this notion that we have to make queer horror that's more palpable for straight audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting very frustrated by that. And so There's a Zombie Outside is really a meta critique and attack on a space that I hold very dear. And I feel like if I can't look at something that I care about critically and how it's failing and also how it can be damaging, then what's the point, you know? And I had for so long been submitting horror projects to queer festivals, and it was too horror for queer festivals. And I would submit things to horror festivals, and it was too queer. Mm-hmm. And so There's a Zombie Outside deals with all of those things in the context of this sort of like abstract horror movie. And it was a weird script. I admit it's a weird script. And when I wrote it, I thought, well, I can try and find someone to produce this via a streamer or whatever, or I can make it myself. And if I make it myself, we don't have to compromise. And so that's what we did. And I'm proud of the result while also acknowledging it's not everybody's cup of tea. But when you're dealing with that kind of granular approach to our relationship with art, it can't be everybody's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what makes independent queer horror especially so exciting, is that it's not everybody's cup of tea, and that it becomes there's something more authentic about it in that way. Because I've even had people on my team basically tell me that I need to do things that are more mainstream, and I need to stop being so queer about the things that I make. And I'm like, why? I mean, yes, I would love to have something on Netflix. I don't ever see that happening. So why would I compromise what I want to do that? So
Well, ultimately what it is when people ask you to make things that are more mainstream, they're asking you in some capacity, especially when it comes to queer art, to um, minimize the authenticity of the story. And listen, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've done mainstream things. I've written a lot for network television and streaming platforms, and it's been a very great trajectory of the work that I've gotten to do. But how I've navigated the kind of queer side of my life versus the kind of more mainstream is every time I work on a project over here, if I can put resources I gained here to things they won't let me make, that to me is the win. Because I know I'm not going to get to make this over here. But if I can use the skills that I get here to tell this story and it can find the people that need it, then I feel like I did my job. And I don't, in telling those stories, want to delegitimize any of what I'm trying to say, because I think sometimes we go to these spaces where only certain lenses of queer media are allowed. And I'm sure you've experienced this. I remember when I first was kind of coming up through the world of filmmaking and the festival scene, if you would go to queer festivals, what they really wanted was affirmation. They wanted, queer joy. We want nothing but affirming stories. And I think that's important. Anybody who is growing up in queer needs to see these kind of things. They need affirming queer stories. But there's also a point in your life where you need the depth of the queer experience. And as I've said many times with relation to There's a Zombie Outside, I was getting kind of tired of being told that we could only make movies about queer joy or movies about queer positivity, because, yeah, queer jubilation and queer joy are important, but I'm queer mad sometimes. I'm queer pissed. I'm queer depressed. And if we cannot justly present that on screen, on page, in art, then we actually are not speaking truth to power about our experiences. And that was really, really significant to me. And I knew that making something that was a little more downbeat, or maybe didn't always portray everything that we do in a positive light, would not be for everybody. But it was authentic to my experience and my cast's experience and my crew's experience. And that's why when I sent that script around and everybody who was part of it ended up being part of it, it spoke to them. And it's like we all felt motivated to do that work.
No, I love that. I think it's something that we don't see enough of. I mean, from my angle, I growing up, there were only two types of queer movies that you would ever see. It was a story about AIDS and HIV, or a story about coming out. And I mean, those are important stories, and I never will take away from the fact that how valuable and important those things are. But there's so much more to what we do than those two moments in our life, in our existence as people. And I like when I see people who will make something that's just like a slice of life is the wrong thing, but like a peek into another part of the life of a queer person. And I'm so excited by people like you and Roger Connors and the Monster Makeup Boys. We're all trying to do that kind of thing by bringing queer horror out in the world in a way that the world doesn't want us to, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think there's often this question when you make something that is focused, where critics or naysayers will say, well, who's this for? But the truth is, if you as artists are making it, it's for you first and foremost, because you felt in some capacity the need for this thing to exist. And the truth about art is, if you as artists needed it, somebody else does too. And so I really, really do think there is such power in getting out there and telling your own stories, as like woo woo as that sounds, like get out there and do the thing. But it is important, because there are people who are waiting for the story that you have to tell. And I really think that one valuable lesson I learned a long time ago, when I first started doing horror conventions, was I would watch and see these movies that maybe had been critically reviled or commercially downtrodden, or maybe even just in the larger fan community weren't embraced. But for like that person right there or that person over there, it really meant everything. And it was the perspective that I needed, that every movie that exists is at least one person's favorite movie, period. And so if you make a piece of art, it will find the person that it needs to, then you did your job. And of course, every filmmaker's dream is like, if those two people are four and those four people are 10 and those 10 are 100 and 1,000. But I think that it's very true also that as artists, you just have to kind of be zen about it, and hope that it gets to the people it needs to, and actually know that it will. That's just because, you know, the people who seek out the work that we make in the indie sphere, they're looking for it. You know, that's actually something that's more authentic than an experience. Like, of course, it would be great to open in every movie theater in the country. But
Yeah.
you know as well as I do that when you make independent queer art, we put it out there, we promote it on our socials, or we do shows, or we do whatever we can to sound the horn. But at the end of the day, you need horror fans and queer movie fans who are looking for it. And so it's them that come looking for it that we make it for, because they want it, they need it, they're searching for it. And so that's something that's really affirming to me as well, because in a way it's almost more authentic. Like, we don't get the wicked ad campaign, right?
No.
Yeah.
But you know, we can get fans just as powerful and just as vocal as those fans can be.
Yeah.
And they, again, as you said, they might be fewer, but they are no less as ferociously excited for what they see. So,
and just as important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a song from a musical called Title of Show called Nine People's Favorite Things. And it's basically that the whole thing is like, yes, we're writing this musical that maybe only 9 people will like, but those 9 people they'll be their favorite thing, as opposed to everyone else's 9th favorite thing. I'd rather be the favorite thing. So
yeah, I also have this firm belief that art that has a point of view is the most important. Yes. Because it's going to find the people who are looking for that point of view. And then the people who don't like it or disagree, you didn't make it for them anyway. Yeah. I have always had what my podcast co-host likes to say is weird taste, and she's probably right. But I've never gravitated towards things that were big and shiny. I've always liked the weird and offbeat stuff. And that is not in any way like a knock of popular things. I have never been that person. I'm not trying to be the guy that's like, I was into the band before the band was cool. That's not my outlook. I actually believe that in this awful world, anything that brings you joy, seize onto it. So like, if like you're on the Wicked train right now, go for it. Like if Transformers is your favorite movie, go for it. Like, I think that's great. But for me, Michael Varrati, like, I grew up watching late night cable nonsense. I loved the movies that looked like they were made with like Scotch tape and a dream. And for some reason, that grittiness was something that seeped in early, and that just speaks to me. And I think that there is something about the rough edges that's just so the essence of the art that I love and the art that I aspire to, that if there's not a point of view because somebody kind of market tested it into the largest space, I always feel like I'm left in this place of, who is this for? And I feel like a movie often that's made for everybody feels like it's for no one. Mm-hmm. And that leaves me feeling kind of like, I want it divisive. Like, I don't need it to be like pissing people off in like the streets. Maybe sometimes, I'm not mad at that, but it's just like, I at least want to walk away from a movie and be like, yeah, I got it. I got what they were going for better or worse. Like, there are movies that I think are brilliant movies that I personally don't jive with. And it's sort of just based on the fact that I at least feel like I knew the filmmaker was doing something, you know?
I really love when I'm the same way. I really love when someone wants to tell us something and doesn't feel like they're compromising their vision on it. So
Yeah.
that's really, I think, what's the most exciting thing about movies, especially independent movies. I think because you won't get that in a mainstream movie. I mean, there's just not a lot of room for it because there's too many people involved that have money and
Yeah.
make those decisions. So and again, money's great, and if you want to give it to me, I'll take it. But
Yeah. I mean, no filmmaker I know would say no to more money, believe me.
exactly. So, but it's the strings that come with it that sometimes complicate the matter. So,
Oh yeah, I mean, I do often look at these movies that are so big in scale, like a $400 million movie. The one that often comes to mind when I think about it, it was like how everybody during that kind of zenith of the superhero cycle gravitated towards Wonder Woman, which I get. I think Wonder Woman was a lot of fun. But then when we were all trapped at home during the pandemic and Wonder Woman 1984, the sequel came out, there seemed to be like this instant like turn on Patty Jenkins, the director.
mhm.
And I don't know what Patty's like, you know, mode of directing is. I don't know how she's on set. I can't speak really to the creative process. But as I was watching the movie, as somebody who does really make a big part of my living writing scripts for networks and studios and things, I know what it is to receive notes that are money motivated notes or market motivated notes that you're thinking like from a story standpoint, you're like, this doesn't make sense, but you have to do it because you're under contract or whatever. And I know what that is when I'm doing like a small scale movie for, you know, a Christmas film for Lifetime or something. I can only imagine the level of something that is a $400 million
Yeah.
movie, a $500 million movie. And I almost feel like the anxiety of that pressure, because you know every cook is in that kitchen.
Mhm.
So then there's a part of me from a filmmaking standpoint is, how do you even know that what ended up on screen is what, when she like started day one working on that movie, what she intended? Like, and that's just too much money. I think is a bad thing,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean I don't want it, you know?
I'll take it, but I mean, I always feel that way about the first Wonder Woman. And like, again, I love it. It's a lot of fun. It has some of the best, like that trench scene in World
Oh,
War
so
One.
good.
Beautiful. I love it. I still get chills just thinking about it. But I feel like you can see like the ending feels like somebody came in and told her we need a different ending than what you want to give, because it feels like they said you have to have a big fight at the end. Uh,
Hmm.
because the movie wasn't leading up to that. The movie was leading up to Diana realizing that sometimes men suck.
Yeah.
Man's world, rather, not just men specifically. This is not me being a difficult gay man saying men suck, but then it feels like someone from Warner Brothers came in and said you need to make sure she fights someone at the end, and that's not what the movie felt like it was leading towards.
Yeah.
So you can see that you can see these moments where it's like where she's got to compromise the vision that she had, at least. Again, I don't know because I wasn't there, but as somebody again who also writes scripts and thinks about these things, I feel like this is not how I would have thought the movie would go in that direction. So
Yeah, it is. It's always very interesting to consider. And it is the thing that I guess I wish audiences took more into account when they watch films. Uh, but I also understand that's not realistic. We now live in the era of social media where there is this dopamine hit to the second that you make a movie, or rather, you watch a movie. You log on to whatever website is of your particular choice, and it's either the best thing you ever saw or the worst thing you ever saw. And it's these kind of like snap moments,
and
and
nothing.
that gets clicks. And I think that it's not fun for folks who just are watching movies for fun to think about these like granular issues of like, well, she probably got notes. And you really actually, if that's what you're thinking about after watching a movie, then there is something wrong anyway. So I do get the catch 22 of it all. So
Mhm. Do you find that with as social media has developed, you have changed how you write about movies on social media?
no, because I have never really been very concerned about what other people think of my taste in movies. I mean, that's very clear based on just what I said. I would rather watch Attack of the Killer Tomatoes than like some big Oscar movie, you know, and that's always been true. And I've been very vocal about that since I was a kid. So I think in some ways it actually, I don't want to say sets me apart, but I think people like that when they log on to social media, I'm just out there talking about whatever. I really haven't had a hot take on Wicked. It doesn't mean that I couldn't, but I was more interested last week in talking about a haunted lawnmower movie called Blades from 1988 because I love that movie, and I saw someone talking about how come there's never been a movie about a ghost inside of a lawnmower. I'm like, actually, there is, and I love it. And so I think that for me, because a lot of the movies that I legitimately am just like yapping about anyway are movies a lot of people think are stupid, and maybe justly so, I've never really been worried about altering how I talk about them because, one, at this point in my life on the internet, people have come to expect that they're not going to get their hot takes on the most recent thing from me. But if there is like some, 1970 Dracula movie where Dracula fights ninjas, well, maybe Michael will have something to say about that, but we're not like going to hear about Stranger Things season 5 from him. And I've just always been like that. And I don't have like Letterboxd. I know a lot of people really love that because I'm not going to review movies. I feel really weird as a filmmaker reviewing movies. It feels very strange to me. I'm not a critic. I'm not interested in being a critic. And I think good criticism is very important. It's just not what I do. I think leave that to the people who enjoy doing it. I enjoy watching a movie, having a personal thought about it, and then maybe keeping it to myself.
I generally am the same way. I rarely will post something that I'll rarely post about a movie unless it's like an old one. I'm bringing out an old one. I'm like, oh, by the way, did you know?
Yeah.
And I really have. I myself have noticed when I was younger, I think, and social media was still a new thing. I was more open to the idea of saying something I didn't like, oh, I just saw that movie and I don't like it. But as the years have progressed, I realized there's no fun and there's no point in writing, putting them. And again, as I've developed as a filmmaker as well, I'm like, why would I want to say somebody's movie I didn't like? I mean, there's so many movies I like and I love. Why would I spend time? And also, they don't need. I'm not a critic. As you said, I don't want to put out there my thoughts about it because I mean that's not important. I mean, if somebody asks me about it, that's one thing, but I'm not going to just voluntarily put it down. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that I come from a similar place where I really only want to talk about things that I like. And I get really disinterested when I maybe say something about a movie that I enjoy and someone has to kind of like comes flying in and be like, well, actually, blah, 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 blah. But I don't mind people disliking it. It's just not how I engage on the internet. That's just not how I do. Like, I'm not here for like, I'm not going to argue with somebody about like why Ernest Scared Stupid is good or bad. Like, that the world is on fire. There are bigger issues. And I think that what's really quite been fascinating is that when these kind of conversations happen, it's been very popular when folks are loving things. Invariably, they're contrarians, and that's fine. And you see that kind of phrase bandied about, like, let people enjoy things. And then I've also seen the adverse where people are like, well, let people not enjoy things. And I actually think both are fine. You are allowed to not enjoy things, and you're allowed to enjoy things. But sometimes I think because of the weird focus of how social media exists, people forget that every interaction you have is not like this big monumental thing. It's just like every movie you watch is not the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. A lot of things just exist in a passable, this is fine space. And that's actually how things should be. Like if I log on and say, hey, Joshua, I really think that I'll just use Ernest Scared Stupid. Ernest Scared Stupid is great. And you're like, I don't. I'm like, great. Here we are on the internet, separated by miles. Do we need to really like start going at each other? It's like, wow, your dog did this. Like you see this stuff happen. I'm just like, gang, the kids are right. Touch some grass,
Seriously, I never thought I would actually see that term and realize how important it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I unfortunately see way too much in my algorithm of people talking about the Snyderverse versus the DCU, and I'm like, good lord, just people just stop it completely. Like, just go out and touch grass, as you said. It's
And
just
what's funny about that too is like when I was a kid, I mean, I was in elementary school when Batman 89 was coming out. And it was huge because you know what we didn't get was superhero movies. And they
Mhm.
were often considered less than, or they were treated sort of like the carnival of like the summer releases. And it was not quite to the pedigree that comic book movies are now getting nominated for Oscars and all of these things. So it was just sort of a novelty to even get a superhero as mainstream as Batman to suddenly have a major theatrical release.
Mhm.
Prior to 1989, Batman was not in theaters since 1966.
Yeah.
And now it feels like we have an embarrassment of riches. And that's the problem, is when we have too much too quick, people dig their heels in about these weird things. And it's fine if you like this or you don't like this or blah, 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 blah. But remember, not so long ago, we didn't have this at all. And
Mhm.
so to argue whether the Snyderverse or James Gunn's DCU is better is actually a luxury
Mhm.
that those of us who grew up reading comic book books and just hoped, that we would maybe one day see, Metamorpho on screen. It's like, and now people are like big mad about stupid stuff. I'm like, I went and saw Shaquille O'Neal in Steel because I liked that character, and we didn't get that,
That
like,
was the best we had back then.
yeah. And I still like that movie, so I'm going to throw it down to Shaq on this one.
And I think the same thing's happening to horror though too,
Yeah.
because all of a sudden horror is now there can be prestige horror, which
Mm-hmm.
when again I think we're relatively the same age. So when I was growing up, there was no movies in theaters that were nominated for Oscars that were horror, and all of a sudden, but now of course every time one of those prestige horror doesn't do well in the box office, you get the articles that come out like, horror is now dead, or there's too much horror in the world, and it's like, good no.
And then the pendulum swings, right? And then as soon as another one does well, which invariably they do, because studios do crank out horror movies because they make money, whether they're commercial successes or not. I mean,
And they can
critical
be
successes or not.
relatively cheap, people, so give us
Yeah.
money to make horror movies.
But what happens is like 8 to 9 to 10 times a year, there's always some like big publication that's like, is horror back? I'm like, guys, it didn't go anywhere. Like literally a horror movie opened at number one, like at least one weekend out of every month. Like,
And it's because they're just so cheap and good to make. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think we'll have several horror movies nominated for Oscars this year.
I do too.
Because but it's just interesting to see how the industry has started to evolve finally after 100 years of
Yeah.
it. I mean, movies that should have been nominated that will never look. We'll never get Tony Collette for Hereditary.
Yeah.
So, but
Or Tony Todd for Candyman.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to see that evolve. But it's also interesting. All of this stuff on social media is I've never mastered the social media aspect. I always feel weird posting anything, but as an independent filmmaker, you have to post. Otherwise, people won't know your stuff exists. So
It's interesting. In the late thousands, kind of my first sort of visible online gig was I was doing op-ed pieces for Huffington Post. And that to me was sort of the training ground for what everything that would come on the internet for me. Because that point, HuffPost was really, really like engaged with the moment and the conversation. And even though I was writing op-ed stuff about like, Wes Craven or blah, 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 every now and then I would have something a little more political. But from jump, I learned that I could say puppies are great in an article. And I would get like 500 like messages in the message board beneath the piece. Be like, screw you, blah, 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 blah. Like, or like some of the most incendiary, like queer slurs, et cetera, about innocuous opinions. And I realized fairly early that there is this just knee-jerk reaction to be heard. And if you don't take it so seriously, that does not mean that like people should be like terrible to each other. But how I've engaged on the internet since was, I just go out there and say what I have to say. And you can agree or you don't. Sometimes I'll hang out and talk. Sometimes I don't. And then when I close my laptop or set down my phone, I don't think about it. Because if you do, it consumes you. And I've seen it happen to so many colleagues where they get worried about it. And it's just like, okay, I mean, my social media has over the years kind of morphed into watch this, listen to this, I wrote this. Also, I just watched blankety blank from 1987 with like, a killer hot dog or something. I don't know. And so, if people are going to come and argue with me online, it's like, do you know who you're arguing with? I'm an idiot who likes fucking VHS movies. Like, it's like, I'm not the person that you want to spend your time fighting with. And adversely, I'm not going to spend my time fighting with you. We can all make this a better place if we just remember what it is. This is all it is. It's just a forum where people say stuff and then leave. Don't be mean. Try and be gracious. And don't take too much too serious. That's it.
It's nice to have people like you who do that on the internet, because then I also selfishly get good recommendations for movies to watch that I haven't seen. Because my mother was never one of those people who said I couldn't watch something, but growing up in a very small town, we had a very small movie rental spot, so or Blockbuster. But my mother did all the renting of everything, so she was not a fan of horror. So I really didn't get to discover a lot of a fun 80s horror until much later in life, and I'm still discovering it, which I think one of the good things that came out of the pandemic was all of the horror that I watched. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. We moved a lot when I was growing up, and we certainly had access to some cool video stores and then like places that weren't so cool. And I am a product of the video store era. We talk a lot about it on Midnight Mass, the podcast that I co-host. But I do think it's very interesting where there are many people who discovered their movies via the movie theater, and there's that like intense devotion to the movie theater, which I understand. And then there are folks who are extremely nostalgic for video stores. But how I made my way to horror actually was late night cable. My parents weren't very restrictive either. I think it was probably because we were kind of so much on the go. My mom's like, whatever, like, there's just too much happening. But, when you're a kid, I couldn't drive to the video store myself, but I would stay up and I would watch USA Up All Night or Commander USA, and they would air these horror movies and like sex comedies and just like weird things. It's probably where I started, developing my taste for strange stuff. And of course, I recognize, things that would be playing on Up All Night or Elvira's Movie Macabre were definitely edited for television, but it started my easing into what would become an obsession with the genre. And then like by the time I saw the unedited versions of these movies, I had also been watching so much weird stuff that it didn't really like faze me. And I really, really am grateful for whoever was running cable television back at the end of the 80s and the early 90s, because if you turned on TV at the right hour, they were filling space, but they were filling space with the weirdest stuff. And the weirdest stuff birthed me. So
I'm very thankful for whoever was running Comedy Central back in the day, because that's where I think I first discovered horror, because they replayed American Werewolf in London like a billion times. And I'm almost certain that was the very first like horror movie that I can remember like watching from beginning to end. And I'm like, I don't know why that wasn't Comedy Central, but I am very grateful that it was. So.
You know what though is funny is I had a job right out of college, and I remember I was like the Office, horror guy. They knew that I liked scary movies, and there was this woman that I worked with who was very much down on horror movies. She was not mean about it, but she's just like, those aren't for me. But one October, she was like, my husband and I want to rent a horror movie for Halloween, and we want you to recommend it to us since you like all this stuff. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, what are you looking for? She's like, well, I don't want too much gore. I don't want anything disgusting, blah, 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 blah. And she was kind of like giving me all these parameters. And I was like, you know what? You should rent An American Werewolf in London. Because I thought to myself, it's got just enough like creature stuff. And yeah, I think the transformation could probably be like, alarming to some people, but it's contained. But it's a classic monster. It's a werewolf. It's fun. It has that kind of 80s comedy. And when they came back after Halloween, she's like, we watched it. And she's like, it was too funny. She's like, I thought you were going to recommend a scary movie to me. I was like, all right, well, you win some, you lose some. So to your point about it airing on Comedy Central, apparently the world thinks this movie is hilarious, whereas I just think it's a good werewolf movie.
I think it's probably my favorite werewolf movie because I don't I it just everything else just doesn't do what this one does for me. So
yeah, I get that. I think it is great. It is really good.
But I do to that point. I really love when I get to introduce somebody who says they don't like horror to horror and they realize, oh, horror is not just what I thought it was, because everyone thinks horror is Saw. Like everyone thinks horror is Saw or Hostel, or maybe Terrifier if they even know what that is.
Right.
They don't know what horror has. Bless you.
Thank
has
you.
the whole variety of what horror can be. And so it's always fun. I don't know if you had this experience. I've had a lot of people, because the very first thing I made is a queer soap opera. So that's what I've met a lot of my actors with, and I brought them along when I started making horror movies. When I finally was like, you know what, it's time. I'm going to do my own horror movies.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, they don't watch horror and they never acted in horror, so they get terrified of being in the movies I'm putting them in. I don't know if you had experience at all.
Yeah, a little bit. It's funny. I've built a nice little film family over the years, and at this point, a lot of the folks that I work with are sort of tapped into everything that goes on. But the lead actor of There's a Zombie Outside, Ben Bauer, who has been in a lot of queer media over the years. When Ben and I met, we actually met at Outfest here in Los Angeles, which is a very prominent LGBTQIA film festival, and we just kind of really gelled, and we were like, we should work together. But Ben, I say infamously because I bring it up as much as I can, had done an interview where he said that his like whole career dream was to be like the gay male Meg Ryan. He wanted to make rom-coms. He wanted to be in like sweet movies. So then, he starts working with me, and I like don't make sweet movies. And often he plays the worst possible person in all of these films, or like, he's been stabbed and exploded. And like we've done so many things to him over the years that every time we do like festival Q&As together, when people talk to him about, where he is, I always make fun of him. I'm just like, this kid just wanted to make When Harry Met Sally, and instead, I'm feeding him to creatures. But he keeps coming back, and he does love it. And he has been very, very into the experience and the ride. And he does love horror. He loves watching horror. He goes to see horror movies all the time. I just think that as an actor, when he was starting out, I don't know that that's where he thought he was going to be, but like he's discovered the joy for it. And I don't know if this happens with your actors. My favorite thing is when I meet new people, when they find out you do horror, they'll be like, oh, I've always wanted to die in a horror movie.
I get that so many times.
Yeah. And my favorite thing about that, and I talk about this a lot because people say that, and I'm like, you think you want to do that until I actually hire you to do that. And then it's like 4 a.m. and you've got layers of prosthetics or like fake blood caked to your body. And it's cold. Because it's, I've done a little bit of acting over the years myself, and I've been savaged and, ripped apart and all of these things. It was fun to do. But that often came out of necessity. Like, how it is with indie films. Like sometimes the easiest way to cast somebody is cast yourself if you don't have the budget or whatever.
Honestly, one of the reasons other than the fact that I also love acting, it's one of the reasons I cast myself, because I know I will be there. So
well, and I saw your trailer up front, which I have questions about shooting in the snow. But I know a lot of people who do like to act, and I used to like to act, and I still do. I do a lot of voice work, and I really enjoy that. But I'm less in front of the camera these days because I always knew that I wanted to write, and I always knew that I wanted to produce and direct. And I will pop up for friends and things, and I enjoy doing it. But when actors are like, oh my God, do you know how fun it would be to die in a horror movie? I'm like, well, I have a number of times. And I'm here to tell you, it's a monkey's paw wish. I will tell you.
I had, in fact, the contract has 2 people who both were very excited to be killed in a horror movie, and I have them outside, basically naked, or in one person's case, actually naked, in the snow, And obviously we took precautions. We made sure
Of
they were
course.
safe and warm and everything. This is not for you. This is for all people listening who don't think I would do that. So just be
Yeah.
but trust, it was like, it was late, it was cold, it was dark, and they were covered in blood and like crawling on the snow. And I'm like, well, this is what you wanted. You wanted
Oh,
you wanted your Drew Barrymore moment. So
and that's it. They all want the Drew Barrymore moment. And the thing about shooting in the cold too is that fake blood freezes and it like
yeah.
cracks against your skin.
Hmm.
I was in a feature film that shot in Western Pennsylvania, and for whatever reason, the weather forecast was all the rain. Like for 11 straight days, it just rained. And we were shooting these scenes in caverns. And so I was like on rocks in the rain underground. And I had like this prosthetic where it was like down the side of my body. And I remember like I was laying on these cold, the rocks were like 30 degrees. It was so cold. But there was a point where when I went to get up, it actually, you could hear it crack. And it was just because it was the fake blood that had like stuck to the rock. And I was just like, okay, I need to get on the other side of the camera because this is not.
This was probably the hardest moment for me, I think, when I did it. I was in a very short film where I was in a pig head prosthetic, basically. It was like, I had a snout, I had a bald cap, I had big ears and everything. And I was in my underwear after that because they wanted me to be this pig man that was crawling out of a trunk of a car. And so I didn't have any socks on or anything. We're in the middle of the Bronx on the street. It's like 3 a.m. It wasn't cold outside, but it was very, very, very wet. And I kept walking back and forth and getting out of the car and everything, and my feet kept getting wet, and my underwear was getting, everything was wet. And so I got back in the car, and I literally could not stop shaking. Like, I've never had that experience before where I just couldn't stop my body from shaking. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be still in this shot, and I'm like, you need to give me a minute to like warm up or something, because
Yeah.
I couldn't do what they acted, and it was really hard to do that. I was like, this is amazing. From one perspective, it was amazing, of like an out of body sort of like, oh, this is a fascinating experience to have as an actor. The other is like, oh my god, why can't I stop shaking so I can get this shot done?
Yeah, no, I do think, especially if you're an indie filmmaker, it's good experience to have because you have a better understanding of what you're asking people to do.
Mhm.
And it's also good to be put into those circumstances as director because you maybe remember like this was too cold for me, or like how can I mitigate this so when I ask someone to do this. And yeah, you know, you hear all the time there are actor directors and technical directors, and I think that like when you're an indie director, you have to be a bit of all.
Yeah.
But horror films always come with the added bonus, usually of some sort of like weird discomfort. So you have to like know what you're doing and take care of the people that are doing it for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you and I probably both learned trial by fire.
I think when you, because I didn't go to film school, so this was my experience, was like saying I've got to figure it out, and I will never ask an actor to do something I wouldn't do though.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify in case anybody's thinking otherwise, the film that I did where I was on the rocks, like the filmmaker handled it really well. Like he did a great job. It's just that thing that like there are elements you can't control. If you are in the elements and it's cold and you're covered with an item that freezes to your body, it just, you know, you do what you do to make the movie. So
unfortunately, we're not working on sound stages. We're working in actual environments. So, or fortunately, because sound stages will have their own problems and everything.
They do. They do.
Like money usually is the cost of them. But, so what are you working on right now, Michael?
Well, I just finished another project that people will see in probably about a year. And then I recently wrapped up directing, writing, producing the Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. I've done so over a couple years now, and it sounds like I'm going to be doing it again. So someone seems to like what I'm up to. And then I've just got a couple different projects. I say yes to a lot of things. I've been writing a lot. I actually was on set yesterday. I just directed a Christmas commercial unrelated to horror. And then my partner, Brendan Haley, who's a brilliant writer and producer in his own right, as well as a great production designer. He built all the sets for the Chainsaw Awards this year. and in previous years. He's about to make his feature directorial debut, and we're going to be shooting that in January. And I say we because I'm going to be producing that for him. So I'm looking
wonderful.
forward to seeing what he's got to scare the world with, and it's gonna be fun. I love the script.
Oh, that's so awesome. So yeah, you've got a lot of not a little, big things going on in that in the world of Michael then. So
Yeah.
And then you said you have a podcast that people can find you on. Is that a weekly thing or a monthly thing?
It's every other week. So every other Wednesday at midnight, I co-host a show called Midnight Mass, which I do with drag superstar Peaches Christ. And Peaches and I talk about the cult movies that we're obsessed with. We're really interested in the cults that rise up around these movies that we love. So the episodes are about the movies, but more so about the obsessed fandom that they spurn. And we've done over 120 episodes now. We've had some amazing people on the show. John Cameron Mitchell's been on the show. Kirk Hammett from Metallica has been on the show. David Dust Malchin. We talked to so many different people across genre, as well as the things that they're obsessed with. So sometimes we have people who are known for cult films, but for example, I'll use Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp. You can hear Felissa Rose talk about Sleepaway Camp in 1,000 different places. Mm-hmm. So when we did Sleepaway Camp, we actually had other guests, and we had Karen Field on, who plays Judy in the movie, but really doesn't often talk as much as Felissa does. But when Felissa joined us on the show, she was on for 9 to 5 because she's obsessed with that movie, and she talked about how seeing that movie helped inspire her and kind of motivated her as a woman who produces. And I think that's kind of the fun of our show, is sometimes the people that we have on are on for things that you wouldn't expect them to be on.
No, I love that. And you're right. I think I mean you only ever really hear Felissa Rose talking about Sleepaway Camp. So I think that's fascinating that you would go about that direction and everything. So where can people see that or listen to that?
Midnight Mass is available really wherever podcasts are found. Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout. We're out, like I said, every other Wednesday at midnight as of the time of this recording, which is live. We have an episode that will be coming out this week, just in time for the holiday. So if you want to get away from your relatives and listen to us talk about a horror film, we got really one of the classics. So.
And where can folks see There's a Zombie Outside, I guess? That's the most recent one. So
yeah, currently There's a Zombie Outside is available on Tubi, which I always recommend first because it's free. But if you're a physical media collector, the film is available on Blu-ray and DVD through Gravitas Ventures. You can also watch it on streaming on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and Deku. Deku, of course, is a queer streaming platform as well. And if it's somewhere else, somebody let me know, because I don't know.
And I guess just because I asked this for people who do work in the horror industry, what is your movie you would recommend from this year's horror crop that you've seen?
The movie I would recommend from this year's horror crop. What's funny? This comes up a lot, especially around Chainsaws time, because Chainsaws, of course, is motivated by the big movies. I often see a lot of movies that are nominated for the Chainsaws because I'm writing and directing the show. So I have to kind of know if I'm going to make a joke about this, or how are we going to weave this in? And then after the show wraps, because it's all consuming for a few months, I usually have to leap into some other work. So I'm often behind. And so people will be like, oh my God, have you seen blank? And I'm like, actually, no, but I will, I promise. So I'm trying to even think what I've seen recently. I did recently see Del Toro's Frankenstein. I will say that I thought that Jacob Elordi's performance in it was really great. I was very, I don't want to say surprised, because that makes it sound like I didn't have any hopes or expectations for him. But I didn't know really a lot about him because I really haven't seen Euphoria.
I really only know him from Saltburn. That's about it, I think. So.
Right. And I really think that if you're going to do Shelley's novel, you need a monster who grounds the story and brings pathos to the story. And I thought he did a really great job, and that's not easy to do, especially in a fantastic world of Guillermo del Toro's kind of scope. He makes these really big movies. but a big movie, kind of like what we were talking about, you can have all the money, but if you don't have something that grounds it, and I think he did a really, really fantastic job grounding the film. So I think that might be the most recent new release horror film that I saw. But I did love Sinners, as maybe basic as an answer it is this year, but I thought it was
It's a
great.
good answer, though. I mean, it's hard
Yeah,
not to give that answer. So,
oh, it was phenomenal. I think it's really uh, a special movie for so many reasons. I think that it was a small story in that it is about a small group of people who ultimately get stuck in a place, but it felt very big in scope, and some of those like sweeping shots of the South. And there was a point where I knew it was a horror movie, and I knew that we were getting the horror, but I could have also just watched Michael B. Jordan just driving around for another hour before we got there. Like the character work I thought was really exceptional.
absolutely. No, I think that I was pleasantly surprised. I knew I would enjoy it pretty much from everything I heard about it from people, but I was pleasantly surprised by the people that I brought with it who were just raving about it, who aren't usually the kind of people who would rave about a horror movie the way I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you keep up with a lot of new releases?
I try to, just because that's the one way I treat myself is going to the cinema. Because I don't have I spend way too much time writing, editing, and acting and filming, and not actually doing anything else for myself. So what I do is the cinema. So,
Well, then why don't I reverse the question for you? In addition to your new movie, of course, what's new that I should see? Because you might have seen something that I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I need to see.
you know
that.
what? I would say this year, I mean, I'm assuming you've seen Weapons already, so.
Yeah.
I would say the one that pleasantly surprised me the most, and it probably shouldn't have because I loved his movie last year, was The Long Walk. It was such a beautiful piece of again a film with a large scope, but a very quiet character piece. And yeah, I really loved it.
I haven't seen it yet, so I'll take that recommendation. I'm really looking forward to seeing it, to be honest. I think that everything I've heard and everybody who's recommended it has been just extremely effusive in their recommendation. And I did read the book back in the day, so I'm curious to see how that works.
It's fascinating because the movie is like, you pretty much, if you didn't know the premise, you pretty much figure it out right away because everything happens right away. But you still like, you get so swept up in these people, and it's all the filmmaking aspect. And again, from a filmmaker's perspective, I'm also like, how do they do these shots of just like them walking constantly? And like, I was just thinking like resets and everything. I'm like, did they just? How much walking do these poor actors do every day?
It's the steps plan, right?
Exactly. So. Well, Michael, we are actually overtime. I wanted to thank you so much for being here tonight. And you're in California, I think, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost dinner time for you then, or it is dinner time for you. But thank you so much for being here. I wanted to get to hang out with you for a while now, and I'm glad that we finally got to do that. So.
Well, thank you so much for the invite, and I really am just so glad that we finally got to sit and talk, because I've really enjoyed, getting to know you from afar, and I love that you're doing the good work. You're making movies that you believe in. And you are, championing film and queer film, and we need more of you. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And anytime you want to talk about filming, just know I'm happy to talk about it more, and we'll bring you back at some point. We'll bring you back when you have these other movies coming out because I want to hear more about them. So
great. I would love that. Thank you so much.
All right. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I had such a blast talking to Michael, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to the two of us. I will see you all next week, but in the meantime, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving if you're based in the U.S., and if not, have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.
And that's the tea.